Alright, so I've never been the type to post online about stuff like this, but I just can't get it out of my head. I keep replaying everything over and over again, wondering if I could have done something sooner. I don't know. Maybe writing it all out will help. This all happened about 6 months ago, in the kind of neighborhood where nothing ever really happens. You know the type: cookie-cutter houses, neatly trimmed lawns. Everyone waves at each other, but doesn't really talk much, beyond small talk. I've lived here for about 10 years now, and it's always been quiet, peaceful even, until this. It started with the kid across the street. His name's Tyler. He's about 16, maybe 17. I don't know him that well. Just the occasional, "Hey, how's it going?" when I see him out front. His dad, Greg, moved in with him about 5 years ago. Single dad, as far as I know. No mom in the picture. Greg's one of those guys who keeps to himself, but he's friendly enough. Always says hi when he's out walking their dog or working on his car in the driveway. Nothing about them ever struck me as odd. Just a normal family. Anyway, one Saturday morning, I was out front trimming the hedges, and I noticed Tyler mowing their lawn. At first, nothing about it seemed out of the ordinary, but then I realized he was mowing in this weird, almost frantic way. Like he wasn't doing straight lines or any kind of pattern. He was just zigzagging all over the place. And he kept stopping, staring at the ground, and then starting again. I figured maybe he was just distracted or bored. Teenagers, right? But then he did something that made me pause. He turned off the mower, got down on his hands and knees, and started digging into the dirt with his bare hands. I stood there for a second, watching, thinking maybe I was seeing things. But no, he was full-on clawing at the ground. I was about to call out to him when Greg came out of the house, yelling at him. I couldn't make out exactly what he said, but his tone was sharp. Tyler jumped up, looking startled, and Greg grabbed his arm and dragged him back inside. The mower was just left there, sitting in the middle of the lawn. Now, I'm not one to stick my nose in other people's business, so I just shrugged it off. Maybe they'd had an argument or something. But the whole thing left me feeling off. I couldn't explain why, but I just couldn't shake the image of Tyler digging like that. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more odd things. Tyler was outside a lot, but not in a normal way. He'd be out there at all hours, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes late at night, always doing something with the yard. One night, around 11 p.m., I saw him out there with a flashlight, poking around the flower beds. Another time, I caught him dragging a tarp across the backyard. I couldn't tell what was under it, but it looked heavy. And then there was the smell. I didn't notice it at first, but one day when I was taking the trash out, I caught this faint, sour odor. At first, I thought maybe one of the neighbors had left their garbage out too long, but it seemed to be coming from Greg and Tyler's yard. It wasn't constant. Some days it was stronger than others, but it was always there, lingering in the air like something rotting. I thought about saying something to Greg, but I didn't want to come off as nosy. Besides, what was I going to say? "Hey, your yard smells weird!" So, I let it go, even though it was starting to bother me more and more. The breaking point came about a month later. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was out back grilling when I heard this loud thud coming from their yard. It sounded like something heavy hitting the ground. Curious, I peeked over the fence. Tyler was out there, shirtless and covered in dirt, digging this massive hole in the middle of the backyard. I'm talking 6 feet long, maybe 3 feet wide. It looked like a grave. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but what else could it be? I called out to him, trying to sound casual. "Hey, Tyler, what are you working on over there?" He froze, his shovel midair, and turned to look at me. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide, like a deer caught in headlights. For a second, I thought he was going to say something, but then Greg came storming out of the house. "Get inside!" he barked at Tyler. Tyler dropped the shovel and bolted for the back door. Greg stood there for a moment, staring at me. He didn't say anything, just gave me this cold, hard look before turning around and going back inside. That was it. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was seriously wrong. The next day I called the non-emergency police line. I didn't want to accuse them of anything. I just told them about the digging, the smell, and the weird behavior. They said they'd send someone to check it out. A couple of officers showed up later that afternoon. I watched from my living room as they knocked on Greg's door. He seemed calm, chatting with them for a few minutes before leading them into the backyard. They were back there for maybe 10 minutes before they left. I figured that was the end of it. Maybe I'd overreacted. But then, 2 days later, a whole team of cops showed up. They had shovels, dogs, the works. The entire street was blocked off. I stood on my porch, watching as they dug up Greg's backyard, and that's when they found it. Buried about 4 feet down was a body. A man, wrapped in plastic. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Everyone was out on their lawns, whispering and speculating. The police wouldn't say much at first, but eventually it came out. The body was Greg's brother, Mark. Here's the kicker. Mark had been missing for over 6 years. Apparently, Greg had been telling everyone, including his son, that Mark had moved out of state. But the truth was far darker. From what I've gathered, and trust me, the rumors have been flying, Greg killed Mark after a falling out over money. Mark had discovered that Greg was embezzling funds from their family business, and he was threatening to go to the authorities. Greg couldn't let that happen, so he took care of it. He buried Mark in the backyard and told Tyler that his uncle had left town. Tyler had no idea. The poor kid had been living there all these years, completely unaware that his uncle was buried just a few feet away. I still don't know what made Tyler start digging. Maybe he overheard something, or maybe he just had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. Whatever it was, I can't imagine what he must be going through now. It's been months, and I still can't wrap my head around it. Every time I look out my window and see that empty house across the street, I get this sick feeling in my stomach. How could something like this happen right under our noses? I keep thinking about all the little signs I ignored. The weird mowing, the digging, the smell. Part of me feels guilty, like I should have done something sooner. But how could I have known? Anyway, that's the story. I wish I could say it had a happy ending, but it doesn't. Greg's in jail now, and Tyler's staying with relatives in another state. The house is up for sale, but no one's bought it yet. I don't blame them. Who'd want to live there knowing what happened? So yeah, that's it. I guess the lesson here is to trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is.